Hello, and welcome to Have a Nice Life, a career change survival guide where you can continue to hate capitalism and careers and having to figure out your job at all and still figure it out. And I'm Pippi Kessler, a organizational psychologist and career and leadership coach.
And I am Hadassah Damien, a money coach and business strategist, and someone who will not be encouraging you to manifest at random from a dead stop. In this part of our series, we are digging into a couple different ways to research and expand your ideas about what is possible with your work for you. And so far in this segment, we've talked about figuring out what the hell types of jobs are even out there, what job titles exist. Good God, there's so many. And what types of income do people earn at their various types of jobs? What's even real? So that is where we've started.
And in this episode, we're going to explore considerations for if you want to include self-employment as one of your options. Just to be clear, we're not going to talk about how to start your own business and here's all the nuts and bolts. There actually are a lot of ways that you can learn about that can be really helpful, but we're not going to give you like a complete self-employment starter kit. What this episode's going to be focused on is things that you might want to consider or think about to figure out if you want to start your own business, if you want that to be one of the options. One thing that you should know about us is that both myself and Hadassah are self-employed. We both work for ourselves. And Hadassah, do you have any things just right off the bat that you want to say about that, or things that you've learned in general about being self-employed?
I mean, one thing that I don't talk about in this section is that you have to have some way to self-manage and self-manage your time to be self-employed. I feel like that's one that it's a fundamental skill. It doesn't mean you have to be self-driven or whatever corporate language, but just some methods to organize your time that work for you are really useful.
Yeah, and some of the things that I think I learned over these years, one is that it took me a while. At first, if I was picking words to describe what I was doing, I was like, I'm a freelance educator. And it took me years to realize that I was self-employed and running a business. It just seemed like, I think I pictured running a bakery as running a business. And so I really didn't put together that was part of what I was also doing. And why that maybe would have been helpful is that there's all of these little fiddly things that I had to learn about how to do, that maybe if I had those keywords, I could have learned about how to find that information more quickly. Like things like, wait, how do you submit your taxes if you're self-employed? Or how do you invoice somebody? And how does that all work? It was just like a lot of little things that I had to find out and learn about. I feel like something else that has really sunk in over time for me is that I thought of it as like self-employment is like, you're just a risk-taking pirate, like biking down the street with no pants or helmet on. And if you have a job, then you're like secure and safe. And over the years, I think also it started to sink in that all types of work arrangements have both things that are harder, easier about them, or more secure and less secure. Like you can have this job for 10 years at an organization and then they just lay you off. And sometimes being self-employed is a form of security, like being like, I can take my trade anywhere. And that sometimes the opposite is true. What happened in COVID to hairdressers, where actually they had a very stable type of trade that they could not do for a period of time. And so there's just a kind of like chaos. That's just another thing that's stuck out to me about self-employment.
Once again, tying our labor to our income provides problems. Well, good thing no one's trying to tie healthcare to it. Oh, wait. Just kidding.
Oh, no. Wait, what?
So there's a couple of things that I want you to think about if you are considering self-employment as one of your options. I work with a lot of small business owners in coaching. And when I say things to people like, you are a small business owner, yeah, for some people, a light bulb goes off. It could be that thing you were just saying. where you might think, oh, I'm freelance, I'm self-employed. Yeah, you run your own business, working for yourself. You're the boss. And there can sometimes be a negative association about being your own boss or bosses or running a business that I think is tied to negative connotations that we have about capitalism in general and bosses in general. But I know for me, when I started working for my friends' small businesses over the course of time, especially when I was young, I started having to confront some of my assumptions about bosses. Like when I was working Sundays at the vintage store in my hometown, I didn't hate my boss. She wasn't torturing me. She was, at this point, now I understand, really hot 27-year-old who, when I was 19, I thought was way grown. But now I understand. I was like, she was just running a vintage store. Let her live. She wanted Sundays off. Or when I worked for my friends' restaurants, and later when I started just having little tiny things that I was doing, selling clothes and crafts, and then later doing graphic design. I've worked for myself on and off this entire time. Like I've always had a little entrepreneurial spirit, but at some point I was like, wow, it feels actually great to get paid for my work and to be in charge of this. And it helped me understand a bit more about when businesses are toxic and bosses are toxic, because I could see that it didn't have to be that way, but it also really confronted some of my assumptions about the man is always bad. It's not that simple. So anyway, you might be going through this series, thinking about what you want, what's important to you, types of jobs that are out there, and saying, I'm starting to identify some things, and I wonder if the way to do it is not to do this stuff for somebody else, but to do it directly with clients or customers, working for myself. And there's a lot of reasons people want to work for themselves, right? You might have a really unique combination of skills or interests or talents. You might have a really specific gift related to something that people need to know about, whether that's money or marketing or medicine. You might like making things that people enjoy, like clothing or food or experiences. You might have a really insightful way to solve a problem that people have, and you want to develop your own solution for it, whether that's how to hire a trusted dog walker, how to use solar to create electricity for their house, or how to save for retirement without burning down the planet. There's so many different reasons people decide to start their own thing, and it can be a wonderful adventure. And yeah, like we've started talking about, it takes some consideration. So first, I'm going to give you 2 little mini exercises here. The first one is questions to reflect on if you're considering working for yourself. And again, this is not everything you need to know. This is simply, should you have some version or variation of self-employment on your options list? And so I've got 5 questions in your initial reflection. The first question is, what will I sell? What will be the reason people give me money? Is it a service? Is it a product? Why? What is it? What's the thing? And I'm not saying you have to have your entire design for the thing done now. You certainly don't. You just need the very rough concept. What will I sell? Pippi's example, when they were freelance educating, okay, I'm going to sell workshops and things. I'm going to sell things that people need, ways for people to learn things. Okay, great. What will I sell? Or I'm thinking about various people who make medicine who I know who are going to sell tinctures or teas or consultations. I'm thinking about consultants who sell expertise, right? And getting a group of people done with something. What are you going to sell? Is it a service? Is it a product? High level. Number 2, will I sell it? You have to be okay with selling things or asking people to hire you and then charging them money if you work for yourself, or else you're not going to make any money. And then it's not a job, it's something else, right? So I want to invite you to soul search on this one and ask yourself, how are you going to feel with selling? And you might even hear the word selling and be like, why is she calling it selling? Look, man, we're in capitalism. We're talking about how you're going to do something that creates sustainability for you. And I want to reiterate, it's always okay to have non-monetized things that we do. It's okay to have stuff in the gift economy that's not about money. That's totally okay. I'm not suggesting to cut that out of your life, but I am saying if you're thinking about making working for yourself or one of your income generating activities, you got to say, will I sell this? Am I comfortable selling something? Or do I want to work for an organization where somebody else is doing the selling? Some people are just like not into it, don't want to do it. Some people are like, oh, I don't like it, but I could figure it out. And some people are like, yeah, sure, it's fine. Where are you on that spectrum? Number 3, will it sell? And this is a moment to do a little bit of looking around. If nobody else is doing anything like what you're selling, you want to investigate why. It could be because you have a genius idea that solves a major problem. It could be because it's not monetizable for some reason. You want to know the difference if you're considering working for yourself as an option. And I think there's lots of really heartfelt services or like beautiful products that people want to create or provide that can be really difficult to monetize because the people you're trying to sell it to maybe can't afford a price to make it sustainable. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it might mean in order for this to be one of your options, you might have to be a little more creative about who's paying for it. I'm thinking about some people I know who are grief doulas, and the way that they get paid for their work is through grants, right? They're not actually expecting that the people who are experiencing the grief or who are at their end of life to be paying the doula, right? Will it sell? Is there a way to make money on this? So this might mean looking into other people who might do something similar or even just work for themselves at all and see like how they're charging for things, what prices are, things like that. Can you imagine the person who would buy this? Is it realistic that you could sell this to them, or do you need someone else to sell it? Will it sell? Question number 4 is, how will I start? And this is some pondering for you to say, might I do this business idea part-time while I work another full-time job? Is there a kind of a slow on-ramp that I want from whatever I'm doing today to I work for myself, ta-da? Do I want to save up money so I can quit my job and pay bills while I start my business or do a certification, or do I have to go back to school or apprentice, right? Like, how am I going to make it financially and logistically sustainable to get going on this? As for the most part, when you start working for yourself, it's not like a switch flips and you suddenly just have all the clients and customers that you need, right? There's an on-ramp period of 6 months to a year or maybe 2 years, right? Depending on what it is you're doing. So how will I start is a question. And then the 5th question, who could tell me more, right? You are likely to know some people who work for themselves full-time or part-time. Go talk to 2 or more of them and ask them about their journey. Who can help you know more? There's tons of people who would love to tell you what it's like to work for themselves. So these are your reflection questions to get you into thinking about, is self-employment something I want to put on my list? What will I sell? Will I sell? Will it sell? How will I start? And who can tell me more? If you want to be working, making income, working for yourself, these are the places to start.
Wow, those are such awesome questions. I love those questions. Those are such good ones. I think it's great. Also, the will I sell one, I think is really awesome too, because it's like this other part of it, which is about, is this a match for you as a particular person? Not like,
That's right.
Could one do this, but could I do it? Do I want to do it? That was one thing I remember doing before I fully went freelance, was that on one day I was like, okay, because I would do workshops for free. And also I had a full-time job in a nonprofit, so I didn't have to charge people. And then one day I was like, Pibby, if you really want to try this, we're going to play a game of truth or dare, which is that when the person on the call you're having right now says, how much is the workshop? You have to say a number. And if you can't do that, you really can't do this. And so I did it. I was like, okay, I did it. I guess I could do this, even though that wasn't like natural for me. But it's like that question of, could I do what I would need to do in order to survive, it's deep.
It's deep. Yeah, and it's not the same as asking, will I instantly be great at it? No, you don't have to instantly be great at it, but am I willing to try it? And I think part of this too, I think a lot about 2 archetypes. One is the archetype of a person who has a fantasy about working for themselves and really spends a lot of time on the website and marketing copy and maybe puts money into that, but then isn't able to get themselves ready to actually go out in the world and say, hey, world, I have this service or product for sale. Or gets stuck at that point, and that's part of why I asked that question, will I sell? And then also, will it sell? I think is a question about that Venn diagram between what do I want to do and what will anybody in the world pay for? There's plenty of stuff that we want to do that we can do amazing, beautiful work in that should get its airtime, but that might not make it a job. And so the other thing I want us thinking about, if you're considering working for yourself, is I want to do a little mini self-employment financial imagination. There's a couple buckets of money that you're going to be working with if you work for yourself. And the highlight here is if you want to work for yourself, aim to earn more than you think you need at first glance. TLDR, taxes. Also, expenses. Like, nothing makes me sadder than someone who's self-employed setting themselves up to not succeed. It's already hard. 50% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years, 85% in the first 10 years. And generally what they fail to do is make enough money to pay for the expenses and like the worker and the owner, who's often the same person's salary. So what kind of money will you need to do this? Bucket number 1 is some sort of startup savings, or sometimes we call it runway. And you can hack and avoid this bucket if you, like Pippi and like I, work a full-time job while you're starting your business. Because the question you're trying to answer here is, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to cover my bills while I get this thing off the ground? Some people find that too much work. Some people just prefer not to, want to be able to focus, in which case you're going to need some other source of income, whether that's a partner, nest egg, whatever. So that's bucket number 1. Bucket number 2, taxes. So when you work for somebody else, there's extra taxes that get paid for that you never see. But when you work for yourself, you, my friend, are paying them. They're called self-employment taxes. When we work for somebody else, taxes, we're paying half of the taxes, and our employer pays half. There's a 15.4% tax that is on top of our federal tax and our state tax and any city tax. When you work for yourself, you're paying that whole thing, and it's called self-employment taxes, 15%. And people often just don't know that's coming at them. And so part of why, if someone works for themselves and you're like, why are they charging that much? That's probably the taxes. And I just see people get stuck there all the time. I also sometimes see people do a little bit of financial magical thinking and say, oh, great, I made $400. I have $400. You don't. You have maybe $250, and the rest of that you got to put in a savings account for your taxes and your business expenses. And so if you are going to start working for yourself for the first time, you have to create this mental model early of the money that I make is not the money that I keep. Some of that just goes into a bucket called taxes. Bucket number 3 is some sort of paid time off reserves. And this might look like taking less money from your business on average so that you can take 2 weeks off or be sick when you're sick and still continue taking that amount of money from your business on average. Right? So again, I made $400. No, I didn't. I made $200, and I'm leaving $150 for taxes and $50 for my PTO fund, because at some point I'm going to want to take time off. So many people who work for themselves really struggle to figure out how to pay themselves when they're not working. And it is this counterintuitive thing of not paying yourself everything that's coming through, having some way to pay for paid time off. Another bucket is just savings for if you want to make a change. So maybe you want to hire, maybe you want to expand, maybe you want to make a new product, maybe. So many things will come to mind when you work for yourself. It can be really useful just to create a little savings bucket to make that possible so that you're not getting into debt trying to do research and experimentation, right? R&D for your business. Another bucket is expenses, retirement. Again, other money that you make that you don't immediately get to spend. And don't forget, it will cost money to run your business. And also someday you're going to want to not work. And then the final bucket is salary, or sometimes we call it draw or distribution. And that's the money that you're actually paying yourself. So a couple buckets here, any startup savings you might need to get going, taxes, money for time off or when you're not working, money to experiment with, money for your expenses, your retirement, and then money to pay yourself. In the workbook, there's a whole bunch more examples that don't really translate to talking through, but the basic recipe for earning money, working for yourself, is that your business revenue, what you bring in through selling something that people buy, minus your various expenses and your taxes and your PTO money and all that, leaves the money to potentially pay yourself. The money that comes in is reduced by all this other stuff, and then what you're left with is an amount of money to pay yourself. So my highlight at the beginning, if you're going to work for yourself, you need to earn more money than you might think that you need to otherwise. So that at the end of the day, think back to these mental experiments that we have been doing with money over this series. Whatever that income is that you want to spend, you have to increase that by all this other stuff. So this is not to make you afraid of working for yourself. This is to make you empowered, so that if it's something you want to put on your list, you know what you're going to be going into. When you work for yourself, earning $100 is not the same thing as getting a spendable $100. That's okay if you can plan around that. So, things to chew on if maybe working for yourself is going to be on your list. Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Hadassah. As somebody who is self-employed, it's just very relieving hearing you talk about all this minutia that being self-employed takes up a lot of brain space. But sometimes it can be hard to find people just talking about it. Okay, this is what's real. And there's so many little details like that when you're doing it start coming to the surface. Things that when you work for somebody also that they are taking care of, that then you realize, oh, wait a second, that's actually money. It's not listed in a salary, but it is worth money that's really significant, like having somebody pay for your health insurance or your pens. And also, like, the other thing related to inflation is that churn of capitalism is that a lot of different companies for things like software, like, they're really maximizing how expensive they can possibly make different things. So you'll be like, maybe if you had a job, they're like, and we pay for Slack, and then you're self-employed and you're like, here I am using free Slack, and Slack's, yeah, so we're changing the rules and you can't use the letter M unless you pay us $6,000.
You can't link unless you pay us.
What? Yeah. We're gonna delete every third word that you type at a random schedule unless you give us your dog. And you don't realize that. And so that stuff is like money. So it also, as a self-employed person, I'm like, oh yeah, I pay for QuickBooks and Dropbox and Slack and Slap Mash and Flapjack, all these things. And they really are good at making them super expensive. And these are things also that it's not listed in like a job listing of, and we'll buy you the letter M in Slack. But once you become self-employed, you become like really aware of that, where you're like, oh my God, this is really expensive and hard. And so I appreciate just like you pre-talking about these logistics.
Yeah, and there's your annual accountant to pay for, and there's paying for your website. There's annual costs as well. And again, this is not to scare you. And if you've ever looked at a small business owner and been like, where do these prices come from? Friends, they're definitely not keeping it all. So just know that. And even if they were, I really want us to be in a world where we can just pay each other's prices and be like, thank you so much. How wonderful. That's my personal goal. And there's lots of ways to solve this, right? Right now, again, we're opening the window of what's possible. People solve this by working in co-ops. People solve this by working in business partnerships together. People solve this by just having a business buddy who you hang out with frequently, just how Pippi and I started this whole little world. We're still in the what part of the work, but soon, my friends, we're beginning to move into the section of the series where we want you to start thinking about how. And so the next episode, we're going to be brainstorming, discerning, and pulling out some first draft ideas from this whole complete and total tide pool of information that we've had you come up with. So thank you for chewing on this far. Be sure to do some documentation however it feels right to you, whether that's drawing, writing, voice note, mural on the side of your garage, whatever you like to help you keep track of all of these details so you don't have to hold them in your head, so that when we come back to start to do some of the brainstorming work, you can just point to it and go, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
We'll see you next time.